If there's a genre that I never thought would get as much attention as it does, it would be the puzzle genre. Looking back though, I guess it makes sense. When going through the motions of life, a need to chill out with friends and play a party game may arise, while for people like me, puzzle games come to mind. And speaking of puzzle games, Professor Layton was a pretty popular series in its time. Starting on the Nintendo DS in 2007, this puzzle of a franchise has since become one of the most recognizable in the genre, selling over 15.5 million units total as of its debut. In all honesty, I was a bit late to the party as I got into the series a mere month before the fourth installment arrived in the US. I can't recall exactly what intrigued me about the games, maybe it was the box art or perhaps just really good marketing, but I did buy into it and immediately fell in love. So, what's the history behind this series? What made it as big as it became? And more importantly, how does each game stack up with one another? Well, that's what I'm here to solve. Welcome, folks, to the Professor Layton retrospective, starting off with the series' first game, Professor Layton and the Curious Village. Now, before continuing, these videos are both retrospectives and reviews, meaning that there are indeed spoilers for the series, not only because I'll be talking about them in great detail for each video, but also because there are necessary threads that tie in with later game stories. Sound good? Okay. The history behind the Professor Layton games is thankfully very simple, yet many details are spread throughout. Since Akihiro Hino, director of the Professor Layton games, was a young child, he had a love for Akira Tago's popular series of puzzle books, Atama no Taiso. Getting Tago on board for the series was key to giving this puzzle franchise a life of its own, differentiating it from the likes of Brain Age and Big Brain Academy, yet retaining the appeal. Surprisingly enough, the box art was one of the ways this goal was achieved. The Japanese cover sports a similar iteration to its American counterpart, but the back is where the differences are clear. Focus was given to the people behind the game, showcasing voice actors, animation, and the puzzle master himself, Akira Tago. Europe's box opted for a style that strays away from both Japan and America's artwork entirely, giving spotlight solely to the puzzles with a brief mention of the story in the back. Finally, there's the good old NTSC version, making an effort to emphasize the story and Nintendo Wi-Fi content. Just a heads up, by the way, I won't be touching any of these downloadable puzzles for the DS games just because the Nintendo Wi-Fi network is dead. Rippin' puzzles. After several revisions to character designs and the like, Professor Layton and the Curious Village released on February 15th, 2007 in Japan and a year later in the West. The game received both critical and financial success with an average rating of 85% and selling over 4 million units worldwide. Now, while the history may be over, our story is just beginning. The mystery begins with our heroes, Professor Herschel Layton, an English gentleman inspired by Phoenix Wright, if Phoenix Wright was a gentleman, and Luke Triton, his self-proclaimed apprentice/sidekick. The duo receive a letter from Lady Dahlia Reinhold, widow of the late Baron Augustus Reinhold, the one who kickstarts our journey. 2 months prior to the events of the game, Baron Reinhold's will was disclosed, revealing the existence of the Golden Apple, a family treasure that was unknown to anyone before his death. Speculating that the unknown treasure links to a more important mystery, the two arrive in Saint Mystere, a quaint little town that just loves puzzles for some reason. After aiding Franco, the bridge keeper there, the duo make their way to the Reinhold estate. While we're here, however, it'd be best to get acquainted with the Reinhold family. The first resident you'll meet is Ramon, the village's lazy man, whom the townsfolk refer to as the man with the creepy lips. In the estate you'll meet Matthew, the family butler who responds to the beck and call of Lady Dahlia. Upon reaching the top floor, we meet the 3 central figures of the Reinhold fortune. Simon Reinhold, a snobbish yet well-respected individual who desires to challenge people's intellect that he believes are inferior to his own. Gordon Reinhold, the typical frugal man who desires a wife, but is too preoccupied with his own insecurities to actually go out and find one. And finally there's Lady Dahlia, whom from our first encounter comes off as a very bossy and commanding individual. Augustus Reinhold's heirs, the ones we'll be seeing throughout the game. These are the central figures. During our first meeting with Lady Dahlia, a loud noise disrupts the encounter, leading Claudia, Lady Dahlia's cat, to flee from the scene. We are then sent to find her and look deeper into the Golden Apple's mystery. Following this, an unknown individual can be seen, plotting in the shadows. Back to our heroes though. After mandating ourselves as the puzzle errand boy, we catch up with Claudia and lure her back with a treat. All is not well upon our return to Reinhold Manor though, as Simon has been murdered. So much for all that central figure nonsense, I guess. Enter Inspector Chelmy, a character who we will see many more times in the series. He's the one investigating this case, and it's clear to see that he is a rather irritable man, but seems to have a passion for what he does. The only clue to Simon's murder is a single wooden cog. Thus, all the mysteries are set, but it's our job to unravel them. How, you may ask? Well, the only way you can in this game. Puzzle solving. Instead of going straight into the meat of the gameplay, let's talk about the main controls first. As per every early DS game, the touchscreen is needed to be implemented in some way, and thankfully it's used very well in this series, for what it is anyway. Similar to most point-and-click games, you can touch areas of the screen in order to find puzzles, items, and hint coins. Hint coins are this game's cheat system. It costs a certain amount to unlock various levels of a hint in a puzzle, and in this installment you can only buy 3 hints per puzzle. Typically there are 3 to 4 hint coins on a screen, meaning that finding them all can be a little bit tricky given the size of the DS's touchscreen, but they can be useful to players who may be stumped on a puzzle or two. With the central element of the series revolving around brain teasers and trick questions, the difficulty of said brain teasers will depend on your own problem-solving skills. There are dozens of different puzzle varieties in the game, but for the sake of organization, I'll separate them into a few categories for you. Interactive puzzles. These include sliding puzzles and any problem that involves the touchscreen to move, slide, and place objects to find the answer. Brain teasers. These are logic-based questions that may have a trick answer or are just wordy to throw you off. Math problems. Unless you're a fan of the subject, these will probably give you the biggest trouble, like they did for me. Simple explanations probably aren't enough for you though, so let's tackle these one by one. Starting off with interactive puzzles, these guys take up nearly half of the index and are problems that anyone could solve with some ingenuity and logic. You may only have the touchscreen at your disposal and it serves the same function in all situations, but what you have to solve with this simple control scheme makes them by far the most interesting. One poor pooch, for example, involves moving around 2 matches to turn this, picture of a dog into roadkill. Kinda dark, but it gets the job done. Get the ball out, another line of puzzles, puts you up to the task of sliding obstructions out of the ball's way. It's simplicity at its finest, but it remains more than effective throughout the game. Next off on the list are brain teasers. 100% of the time you'll need logic and general knowledge in order to fully grasp some of these riddles. They're never easy no matter how many times you encounter them, but you may feel foolish after looking up the answer. Many times the key to unlocking the puzzle's right in your face, but human beings, being the creatures that we are, can tend to overthink things. In the puzzle The Mysterious Note, a series of numbers are placed on paper, and we need to find the true culprit. If you turn your thinking about, the question is spun on its head. Literally. Others, like Strange Hats and Monster, all have the same aha moments upon solving them, making them incredibly satisfying. Last, and in my opinion least, are the math problems. There aren't many reasons that they're unique, aside from maybe the trick nature of some questions. However, they're not just straight up algebra equations, they do have a catch. By no means are they bad puzzles, I do like how they keep you on your toes, but I can hardly find enjoyment in them due to their pacing. In spite of this, there are a few that I do like Finish the Equation, 33333, Farm Work, and Stamp Stumpers. Overall, there are 120 main puzzles in total, but to beat the game you only need to solve 82, meaning that aside from a few story puzzles, you don't need to complete the entire index. So it's kinda like Super Mario 64 in that regard, as weird as it may sound. But why do you need to solve 82 puzzles specifically? Well, sad to say, but with any first game there are bound to be a few problems, and this is one of them. The puzzle number threshold. At certain story points, a villager may block your way, and it's more than likely that they want you to complete a set amount of puzzles. This occurs multiple times, and brings the pacing to a crawl if you don't know how to tackle certain riddles. Don't worry if you miss out on a few puzzles during the main chapter though, as Granny Riddleton's Puzzle Shack will store any ones that you missed, except for hidden ones. Only thing? Be careful not to mess up on the puzzles too many times or else you'll lose Pick-a-Rats. Pick-a-Rats are your score for each puzzle. In the main game they may not seem all too important, but once finishing up the story you will need a certain amount to unlock each door in the extras menu. At least this means there's a completion goal to work towards. To see how well you're doing, Layton's Trunk is available on the menu at any time. In here you can check on mysteries that arise, notes to review on what's happened in the story so far, save of course, and lastly partake in 3 minigames. Bits of these distractions can be acquired after solving a majority of the main puzzles, but I just waited until I had all the pieces of every minigame, cause I'm weird like that. The Gizmo's the initial starting point of your collection, and completing it will unlock a dog that you can name. He's the only one useful to finish, as he'll act as a hint coin detector. The Inventor's House also becomes available upon completion. Next up is the Inn. In St. Mystere, Professor Layton and Luke have separate rooms, and you can customize the items that go into each one's quarters. The happiness meter on the bottom will notify you of what amenities are better suited for Luke or Layton, and completing it will unlock the Decorator's House. Lastly, painting scraps are hidden around the world. Once you locate them all and put the pieces together, you will get a picture of the Baron's former wife and the art lover's house. In each house you'll have 3 really difficult puzzles to tackle, and those aren't even all the houses. The last 2 will have to wait though. Artistically speaking, the game is beautiful for the DS. Yeah, the small screen and low resolution don't do it justice, but from these few scans that are rounded up of pre-rendered shots, the whole environment and overall style resemble that of an old children's book. They give life to Saint Mystere and complement the residents you meet throughout the story. Speaking of which, there are dozens. Each character stands out in personality, speech, and look. Unfortunately, it's not like another certain game where I can recall every minor character's names, but the ones that did stick out to me are pretty easy to remember. Dialogue also left an impression on me, not as much as Ace Attorney, but still a good amount. Shame that most characters only have like 3 sentences before you never see them again. The range of the writing that's there, however, is great, from sarcastic to strange and even humorous. Although I'm really sad that no game throughout the series was ever fully voice acted. Aside from character interactions, one thing I love are the fun facts and tidbits you receive once completing a puzzle. They really give the player a better understanding or more detailed background surrounding the puzzle solved, and sometimes they're just there for a laugh. Thing is though, despite all the good there is some bad, as I don't think the presentation is perfect. My main gripe with the KHAce Village's presentation are the character portraits. During dialogue, their portraits are either facing you or they're facing the character they're talking to, and that's really inconsistent, which bothers me a ton. Half of the time it feels like I'm watching a Les Mis play, and it easily drew me out of the immersion, which is not a good sign. If we're looking at the style on its own merit, it isn't bad, although when you love something you have to admit where it falls short. Thankfully, puzzles don't suffer from inconsistencies. Because of how many there actually are in the game, they could have become stale from pure presence alone, but the stills you see or the puzzles that are just different variations with a different coat of paint contribute a lot to keeping the game from looking samey. Let's not overlook the biggest draw of the game's presentation though, the cutscenes. Once again, the incredibly low resolution does not bring out the beauty anywhere close to the uncompressed version seen in trailers. Nevertheless, it's clear to see the effort in detail, albeit not all of them. That being said, none of this would be very enjoyable without good voice acting. So how is it? I'm happy to say that despite how little dialogue is spoken in the game, the characters that are voiced are dubbed very well. Christopher Robin Miller and Lanny Manila both do excellent jobs with the characters they portray, which just so happens to be all of them. I literally just learned about this while researching for the video, and all I can say is, props. They accomplished their main goal of voice acting, don't have similar sounding characters in the same game. Well, at least for the US dub. That's right, I said the US dub. In the UK release, only Luke is played by another actress, Maria Darling. I can't fairly compare the two as I've heard Lanny's voice for so long and I'm biased, but in a later game I'll cover, I think that both women do an equally good job of voicing Luke, despite the differences in tone and delivery. Professor Layton and the KHAce Village's soundtrack has 25 beautifully composed pieces. Of course there's the now iconic main theme, but also songs that are only in this game, like Curtain of the Night and Ferris Wheel Park. The accordion, piano, and music box are a constant, giving the game that London flair. More variety would have been fantastic of course, as hearing one music track for over 130 puzzles can get to you, but even if I listened to it 1,000 times, it wouldn't have diminished its value as a good instrumental piece to me. This also applies to the music heard in each chapter. I know that you spend less time on the map than in puzzles, but I believe that the track changing in the overworld every now and then went a long way in distinguishing each major area. It's a nice touch. Alright, I've taken up enough of your time, and I don't want to stale these out before we even get to the 3DS titles, so I'd better wrap this up. There are plenty of story spoilers ahead, so if you want to skip them, then click right here or go to the timestamp listed, or don't. From the time after Simon is murdered, Ramon disappears, and rumors speak of it as a kidnapping, something that's happened quite commonly in the village recently. Concurrently, notes from a journal are scattered across Saint Mystere, detailing the death of Baron Reinhold's former wife and even the Baron's sentiments on something. Can't spoil every plot point, can I? While investigating the kidnapping of Ramon, Simon's dead body disappears, forcing Luke and Layton to search the marketplace. In the area, the professor is then handed a vase, which is actually not his. Big shocker. We also get to see a newspaper article of Inspector Chelmy and his wife Amelie. Once we return to the manor, Ramon inexplicably returns with no memory of being kidnapped whatsoever. That's the lesser of our worries though, as Chelmy suspects Professor Layton of murdering Simon. How come? He deduced that the murder weapon was the vase held by Layton in the marketplace. In other words, that was a setup. As apparent as it may be at this point, Inspector Chelmy seems pretty guilty here, but for a different reason. With a single slip-up, Chelmy is revealed to be the mysterious man in the shadows from before, Don Palo. Once fleeing the scene, the mysterious tower seen throughout the adventure opens up, and there we meet Flora Reinhold, the late Baron's daughter. It turns out that the whole search for the golden apple was to find someone worthy of being Flora's guardian. With one final act of desperation from Don Palo, the trio flee the tower and destroy his plans. With the mystery of the golden apple solved, the Professor, Luke, and Flora depart from Saint Mystere. Cue credits. Now that that's out of the way, it's time to talk completion bonuses. Completing every puzzle in the game is by no means an easy task on your own. For the much more overthought puzzles, there's no shame in using a guide, although that satisfaction then becomes lost. For finishing the story, you unlock the Golden Apple's house, and once you've 100% completed all the puzzles and bonus room puzzle houses, you get the Puzzle Master's room, by far the trickiest in the game. After all that, you can access the top secret area, where you can view character profiles, artwork, cutscenes, music, voice clips, and the secret door. The only way to unlock the secret door is by completing the next installment, Professor Layton and the Diabolical Box. Because that is technically a part of Diabolical Box, we'll save it for then. Professor Layton and the Curious Village is a great entry-level puzzle game. The story is simple enough for a middle schooler to understand, and short enough to be within a day or two. Of course, your mileage may vary depending on how you approach puzzle games, but I'd highly recommend this one for any person looking to get into the series. As is expected, improvements are made to certain aspects later on, and that isn't a bad thing, it's great. Sometimes though, simplicity is all you need to get enjoyment out of a game, and I do believe that Curious Village succeeds in that regard. Story-wise, I left some things out of this summary for a reason, as I only want to cover things that will come back in later entries, but I hope that the unsolved mysteries that I left out gave you enough interest to search out and play the game for yourself. Thanks for watching, guys, it's good to be back.